examination in Specialized Crime Investigation 2 with simulation of interview and interrogation or yung CDI-3 natin. So to start with, let's begin with learning objectives. At the end of this lesson, the learners will be able to learn the basic definitions of criminal investigation, acquire knowledge skills on legal responsibilities and technicalities in custodial investigation, acquire knowledge and skill on the basic duty or obligation of the investigator, acquire skills and the application of the tools of criminal investigation, and acquire knowledge on the basic purpose and uses of the four methods of search. The three tools of criminal investigation. Now, what are the three tools in criminal investigation? So, basically, napag-aralan na po natin to during your fundamentals of criminal investigation. First is the information. So, information is the knowledge of facts that the investigator had gathered or acquired from persons or documents which are pertinent or relevant concerning the commission of a crime or criminal activities. So meaning, it is the knowledge you obtain from the investigation, study, or instruction. Next, two general classifications of sources of information. First is the open sources and the second is the closed sources. The open sources, often called as overt intelligence. So it covers 99% of the information collected that are coming from open sources. So now what do you mean by overt intelligence? It is the gathering of information or documents procured openly without regard as to whether the subject or target became knowledgeable of its purpose. So an example or information includes in open sources are the enemy activities, civilians, captured documents, map, weather, forecast, studies, report, and agencies. Yung mga basically na kailangan natin especially in investigation. While si closed sources, often called as covert intelligence. So it covers 1% of the information from closed sources. So it is the secret procurement of information. Since closed sources or covert intelligence, meron po tayong secrecy, which is obtained without the knowledge of the person or person safeguarding vital intelligence interest. So these are the example or the information usually taken through closed sources. For example, yung surveillance, casing, elicitation, surreptitious entry, employment of technical means, tactical interrogation, and observation and description. Next, information classified as to sources. So, meron po tayong tatlong information classified as to sources, regular, cultivated, and grapevine sources. So, when we say regular sources, records from filed government or non-government agencies such as news items, TV broadcasts, telephone messages, and stored computer data. While si cultivated sources, these are information furnished by informants or informers. So what is the difference between informants and informers? So informant refers to a person who gives information to the police voluntarily or involuntarily without any consideration. While si informer, those who give information to the police for prize or reward. Ang purpose niya lang po sa pagbigay ng information is para sa prize or reward. So there are 5 types of informants. So take note for the 5 types of informants: the criminal informant, confidential informant, voluntary informant, special informant, and the anonymous informant. So si criminal informant, an informant who gives information to the police pertaining to the underworld about organized criminals with the understanding that his identity will be protected. So they only give information to the police pertaining to the underworld. It is not literally the underworld itself, but it pertains to the organized criminals. So of course, he gives information with the understanding that his identity will be protected. While the confidential informant, uh, somewhat similar to the criminal informant. The difference is that he gives information who violated the law to include crimes and criminals. So it means he has the knowledge that the person or individual has been violated the law or not. Then, pangatlo is the voluntary informant. So a type of informant to give information freely and willfully as a witness to a certain act. Next is the special informant. So those who gives information concerning specialized cases only, and it is regarded as special treatment by the operatives. An example are teachers, businessmen, and other persons who are in their professional field. Next is the anonymous informant. Those who give information through telephone with the hope that the informant cannot be identified. Next is the grapevine sources. So these are information coming from the underworld characters such as prisoners or ex-convicts. So they are the concerned citizens. Next, interrogation. The process of obtaining an admission or confession from those suspects who have committed a crime. It is confrontational in nature. So the term interrogation also applies to an uncooperative or reluctant witness. So this kind of witness is treated as suspect in order that he will divulge the information needed by the investigator. So in the interrogation process, in this interrogation, the suspect or the witnesses is being forced para po magbigay ng information. Kasi po, the interrogator, meron na po siyang knowledge dun sa crime na nagawa niya. Therefore, i-interrogate na lang po or forcefully itatanong niya sa witnesses and suspect para po makapagbigay sila ng information. Then, under the definition of interrogation is the citations regarding interrogation. So, you can watch this in YouTube. Kindly click the link lang po. Next, field inquiry. It is the general questioning of all persons at the crime scene conducted by the investigator. So, the difference between interrogation and field inquiry is that si field inquiry po, lahat po ng tao na makikita sa crime scene o yung mga witnesses o yung mga person na nakakita sa pangyayari. While questioning din po siya, si field inquiry. While si interrogation po is questioning or forceful questioning with the witness and suspect, hindi na po siya sa crime scene. So, in field inquiry, when an officer comes up to you and starts questioning you. So, always remember that you are within your rights to walk away and not say anything because the police aren't detaining you. Most of the police training manuals state that officers should have legitimate purpose for initiating a field inquiry. We all know that's not always the case. The important thing to remember in a situation like this is that this is what they consider to be a consensual interaction. So, ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng consensual interaction? Meaning, you do not have to answer their questions or speak to them. But if you do so of your own free will. Hindi ka pinipilit na magbigay ng information since you are not being interrogated. As I cited earlier, you are within your rights. May karapatan kang sagutin yung tanong nila at meron ka ding karapatan na hindi sagutin yung tanong nila. So this type of encounter really only lasts long enough for them to ask basic questions about your identity. your residence, what business you have in the area, and a few other limited queries based on their suspicion of criminal activity. They cannot compel you to answer any of their questions in this type of encounter. Next, instrumentation. It is the process of applying instruments or tools of police sciences in criminal investigation and detection. So, the use of the police laboratory in examination of physical evidence such as forensic ballistics and other sciences. So, this is sometimes called criminalistics. So, si instrumentation, once na ginamit na po yung tools for criminal investigation and detection, especially yung mga laboratory equipments natin, yung pag-e-examine sa laboratory. Methods of crime scene search. First is the strip search method or yung tinatawag nating parallel method. In this method, the area is blacked out in the form of rectangle. So in this method, the virtual strips or line are being imagined to walk through on the crime scene and look for the evidences. The method is well suited for the crime scene like classrooms where rows are present already. Each row can be considered as strip. So then, in the strip method, minimum number of the personnel are required since small lang po yung place natin. Sabi nga kanina, it is well suited for classrooms. For those, rows are already present. So one person will start the walkthrough from one corner of the strip and will move towards the other looking for the evidences. So the walkthrough should be slow and thorough. If two personnel are employed, then each of them can start from two different points and continuing to the different ends to double check the search. So, si strip method, meron lang po tayo dyang limited number of personnel since maliit lang yung area natin. For example, meron tayong dalawang searchers. Therefore, sa dulo, yan makikita nyo sa picture, meron tayo dyang end and start. And yung isang searcher, nandito siya sa start while si isa nandun sa end. Therefore, si start, magsisimula na siyang mag-search. While si end, magsisimula din po siyang mag-search. So, kung ano yung madadaanan ni start, madadaanan din po ng nagsa-search na nagsimula sa dulo. For accuracy lang po ng pagkuha ng evidence or evidences. Next, the double strip or grid method of search is a modification of the strip search method. Here, the rectangle is traversed first parallel to the base, then parallel to the side. It is just like the strip method. So the only difference is that the two strips are considered to form a grid. Again, only two people can do the searching, walking through on separate strips, and then will switch their strips for more accuracy. It is a good method for large indoors and outdoors crime scenes. So, kanina po, meron sa strip method or parallel method, nag-start siya sa dulo at saka meron po talagang pinaka-starting point. While dito sa double strip, pag grid type siya, tigisa po yung searcher, isa sa pa-horizontal, isa sa pa-vertical. Pero after nilang mag-search, mag-exchange po sila para sa accuracy ng evidences at para sa accuracy ng searching nila. Next is spiral search method. In this method, the three searchers follow each other along the path of a spiral, beginning on the outside and spiraling in toward the center. So, this is well suited for larger indoor and outdoor crime scene with less obstacles, like furniture. So, the searcher will start either from the center of the room or outward or from the periphery inward. Search as shown in the images on the right part of the slide po natin. Also, two investigators can search together, one moving from the center towards the periphery and other one vice versa. So, in searching po, dito sa spiral search method, meron po tayo dyang three searchers and it is good for or well suited for large indoors. Pwede po siyang mag-start outward papaloob, or pwede naman po siyang mag-start inward, papalabas. And si researchers lang po, magpapalit-palit lang po sila for accuracy of evidences po. Next, zone search method. In this method of search, the area is considered to be approximately circular. The searchers gather at the center and proceed outward along radii or spokes. So this method is only applicable to the larger outdoor scenes like fields, desert, or other such open areas. So it is divided into various zones depending upon the size of the crime scene. So halimbawa nasa field tayo, depende lang po kung ilang division ang magagawa natin sa field na nagkaroon ng incident area or crime scene area. So different individuals will be employed in separate zones and then switching their zone for more accuracy. So the procedure should repeat several times depending on the size of the circle and the number of searchers. The investigators or the searchers can begin from epicenter moving towards their zone to complete the search and then returning back to the epicenter for discussion or collection procedure. So nandito po sila mag-start sa center. Now, pag po nag-start sila, lahat po yan investigator or searcher, si A, B, lahat po hanggang H. Now, si A po, after niyang ma-search yung area niya, lilipat naman po siya kay B. Then si B, lilipat kay C. Same lang po siya ng mga previous method natin na nagpapalit-palit ng place kung saan sila nagsa-search para po sa accuracy ng evidences po natin. And it is only applicable or suitable for larger outdoor scenes like fields, desert, or other open areas. Then after nilang mag-search, after nilang ma-double check lahat yan, magpo-proceed na sila sa epicenter again kung saan sila nag-start. Then, discussion na po nila based sa na-collect nilang evidences and kung ano po yung mga pwede pang procedures na pwede nilang gawin. Next, sketching the crime scene. General type of sketch. So there are two general type of sketch, the rough sketch and the finished sketch. So rough sketch, it is made at the crime scene. No scale, proportion, ignored, and everything is approximate. So in rough sketch natin, makikita nyo na true pencil lang po siya. And kailan po ba ginagawa si sketch? Si sketch is done after photographs had been taken and before anything is moved. Sketch the entire scene, the objects, and the evidences. So once na nag-start po or once na meron po tayong sketching, kailan po ba applicable si sketch? Si sketch po is applicable lang po based po sa mga serious crimes lang po natin. Then ano po yung difference ni rough sketch and ni finished sketch? Si rough sketch po is lapis lang po siya na i-draw natin. Unlike po sa finished sketch, pwede na po siyang produce in either ink or on computer in manner that is not able to be modified. Si rough sketch po, kaya po nakalapis lang siya since ito po is, pwede naman pong ballpen, depende sa dala ng searcher. Pero most specifically or basically used by the sketcher ay lapis. Then rough sketch po, after po na na-photograph lahat ng crime scene, ngayon po, time o turn na po ni sketcher. Yun po yung rough sketch. Now, after nilang mag-investigate, po-proceed na sila sa station and then magkakandak na sila ng finished sketch or gagawin na po nila yung finished sketch. Pwede po siyang gawin through computer or gagamit lang po tayo ng may mga ink na pens po natin. And ginagamit po siya for courtroom presentation. Next, kinds of sketch. So, sa sketch po natin, since may two types of sketch po tayo, si rough sketch and si finished sketch, under pa po doon is meron pa pong tatlong kinds of sketch. Sketch of locality, sketch of grounds, and sketch of details. Sketch of locality, gives a picture of the crime scene in relation to its environment, including neighboring buildings, roads, and other. So sa sketch of locality, for example, nagkaroon po nung crime scene sa Eskinita. Therefore, may mga iba't ibang place pa din doon. Si sketch of locality, kung ano po yung mga kasama na place or kalapit na place is kasama po siya sa AE sketch. Si sketch of grounds includes the crime scene and its nearest environment, example, house with a garden. Since sa sketch of locality as a whole or general po, while si sketch of grounds, doon lang po tayo specific sa crime scene, kung saan siya nangyari. While si sketch of details describe the immediate crime scene only. Si sketch of ground, again, nagsimula tayo sa Maluwa, therefore sa sketch of ground, meron po tayong mas malapit lang po na pinangyarihan ng crime scene. Yung pinakalugar lang na pinangyarihan. While si sketch of details, ito po yung crime scene na talaga. Kung saan nandun yung mga details. Yun po yung i-sketch natin. And that is the sketch of details. Next, crime reconstruction. Reconstruction, it is the assessment made by investigator after the crime scene investigation of how the crime is committed. So there are kinds of reconstructing the crime scene, physical reconstructions and the mental reconstruction. So in physical reconstruction, it is focused only on the pieces of physical evidences. Ito po yung mga nakuhang evidences. While the mental reconstruction lang po is the conclusion formulated in physical reconstruction. So nandito na po yung paggagawa po nila ng report regarding sa nakuha nila in physical reconstruction, and those are the physical evidences. Next topic po, learning objectives. At the end of this lesson, the learners will be able to define homicide investigation and its elements, acquire skills on how to recognize the role of the pathologists in homicide investigation, illustrate changes in post-mortem, and define the different terms related to death investigation. First is the homicide investigation. Homicide investigation is the official inquiry made by the police on the facts and circumstances surrounding the death of a person which is expected to be unlawful under Article 249. So the elements of homicide are: a killing exists, the accused did the act without legal justification and with intent to kill, and the killing is neither murder, parricide, or infanticide. So these are the primary job of the investigator under homicide investigation: to discover whether an offense has been committed under the law, to discover how it was committed, who committed it and by whom it was committed, when it was committed, and under certain circumstances why it was committed. So there are mistakes in the homicide investigation. The mistakes of the homicide investigator cannot be corrected. The homicide investigator should not cross the 3 bridges which he burns behind him. It is important that competent personnel adequately handle the case. So, bakit po nagkakaroon ng mistakes in the homicide investigation? Dahil po, meron po tayong 3 bridges na tinatawag when it comes to homicide investigation. Ano po yung 3 bridges na to? Take note po, the dead person has been moved. Kaya po nagkakaroon ng mistakes kasi po once na na-move na po yung dead person, possible po ng may changes na mangyayari. Next, the cadaver is embalmed and the body is burned or cremated. So there are basic guide for the investigator to look upon is to establish the following. First is the corpus delicti or facts that the crime has been committed, method of operation of the suspect, and identity of the guilty party. So in order for you to know if that case is homicide investigation, kindly look for corpus delicti or yung pinaka-facts po ng crime natin. Then ano ba yung method of operation na ginamit ng suspect? Ginamit is it through knife or other weapons na ginamit na through para po maipalabas na homicide po yung ginawa niya. Then, identity of the guilty party. Then, penalty. Ano po yung penalty na pwede nating ibigay pag na-violate nila ang homicide or yung na-violate nila yung Article 249? Reclusion temporal. 12 years and 1 day to 20 years of imprisonment. Next, murder. Any person who not falling within the provision of Article 246 or yung parricide of the RPC shall kill another if committed with any of the following attendant circumstances. With treachery. So with treachery meaning you are taking advantage of their superior strength with the aid of armed men or employing means to weaken the defense or means of a person to ensure or afford impurity. In consideration of a price, reward, or promise, by means of inundation, fire poison, explosion, shipwreck, stranding of a vessel, derailment or assault upon a streetcar or locomotive, fall of an airship, by means of motor vehicles or with the use of any other means involving great waste and ruin. An occasion of the calamities enumerated in the preceding paragraph of an earthquake, eruption of a volcano, destructive cyclone, epidemic, or any other public calamity, with evident premeditation and with cruelty. With cruelty, it means deliberately and inhumanly augmenting the suffering of the victim or outraging of the person or cause. So now what do you mean by treachery? Again, it is plain and simple. There is treachery if the offended party was not given opportunity to make a defense. While si premeditation, what do you mean by evident premeditation? So evident meaning clear to the eye or judgment. While si premeditation is the act of meditating in advance, deliberation upon a contemplated act, a design form to do something before it is done. So the essence of premeditation is that the execution of the criminal act must be preceded by cool thought and reflection upon the resolution to carry out the criminal intent during the space of time sufficient to arrive at a calm judgment. So there is no evident premeditation without proof of planning. Always remember that there is no evident premeditation without proof of planning. So si murder kasi, with treachery po ito po yung mga circumstances na pwede nating masabi kung bakit siya murder. Next, the elements of murder are a killing exists. The accused killed the deceased under any of the above circumstances qualifying the killing to murder, and the killing does not constitute parricide or infanticide. So, kanina, kung ang penalty ni homicide is reclusion temporal, kay murder naman po is reclusion perpetua. 20 years and 1 day to 40 years imprisonment to death. Next, crimes against person or in destruction of life. Any person who shall kill his father, mother, or child, whether legitimate or illegitimate, or any of his ascendants or descendants, or his spouse shall be guilty of parricide. So these are the elements of crimes against person. That a person is killed, that the deceased is killed by the accused, that the deceased is the father, mother, or child, whether legitimate or illegitimate, or a legitimate other ascendant or other descendant, or the legitimate spouse of the accused. So now what is the penalty for crimes against person? Also, reclusion perpetua, 20 years and 1 day to 40 years to death. Article 247, death or physical injuries inflicted under exceptional circumstances. Any legally married person who, having surprised his spouse in the act of committing sexual intercourse with another person, shall kill any of them or both of them in the act or immediately thereafter, or shall inflict upon them any serious physical injury, shall suffer the penalty of distierro. So, if he shall inflict upon them physical injuries of any kind, he shall be exempt from punishment. So this rule shall be applicable under the same circumstances to parents with respect to their daughters under 18 years of age and their seducer, while the daughters are living with their parents. So any person who shall promote or facilitate prostitution of his wife or daughter, or shall otherwise have consented to the infidelity of the other spouse, shall not be entitled to the benefits of this article. So, since kanina ang sabi there is penalty of destierro, now, ano ba yung destierro? It is prohibition to enter the place or places designated in the sentence nor within the radius therein specified, which shall not be more than 250 and not less than 25 kilometers from the place designated. Next, infanticide. Article 255 o yung infanticide. The killing of a child less than 3 days of age, whether the killer is the parent or grandparent, any other relative of the child, or a stranger. Death is defined as the absence of life in the living matter. So it is the cessation of all vital functions of the body, including the heartbeat, brain activity, and breathing. Next, three kinds of death: somatic death, molecular death, apparent death. So somatic death, also called as clinical death. It is a complete, continuous, persistent cessation of respiration, circulation, and most of all brain functions of an organism. So it is usually pronounced by a physician or other members of the family. While molecular death, it is the cessation of life of the individual cells in the whole body, which occurs one at a time after somatic death. So there is a presence of algor mortis, livor mortis, and rigor mortis. Third is the apparent death, or the state of suspended animation. It is the state of temporary cessation of vital activities of the body, or vital processes were depressed to the minimum compatible with life. So this condition is not actually death, although classified under the kinds of death, because the person or organism is still alive, although it seems that there are no signs of life. So signs of death: cessation of respiration, kanina po dun sa somatic death natin, cessation of heart beating and circulation, cooling of the body, insensibility of the body and loss of power to remove, changes in the eyes, and changes in the skin. Identifying the cadaver. So establishing the identity of the victim is important. It will provide tracing clues to the motive and identity of the perpetrator with the identity known. The investigator can focus attention on the victim's background and establish a possible motive through such information. Victims encountered indoor scenes will normally have identifying data on the body, or such data will be available throughout the crime scene. In outdoor scenes, such evidence is normally not as readily available, since the victim is removed from the personal environment, and also outdoor scene may not be discovered for a long period of time. Thus, evidence may be destroyed by elements of nature or will be lost. So, since lost na nga po yung evidence, if there are no identifying papers of the victim's person, fingerprint should be used as means of identification. Once na na-destroyed na po yung evidences dun po sa crime scene area natin. If fingerprint identification is unsuccessful, the investigator must rely on other methods to establish identity. So, sa identifying the cadaver po, if hindi po nag-work si fingerprint, meron pa po tayong isang method na pwedeng gamitin para po sa pagkakakilanlan ng victim. Dental structures are highly resistant to destruction and are frequently useful when the other proportion or portions of the body are totally decomposed. Yun po yung tinatawag natin na forensic odontology. So the skeletal remains of the victim may also help to determine identity as well as yield other types of information. If bone fractures are noted, they may be used to identify the deceased. But if only corresponding medical records can be located, the widths of the pelvic bones are excellent indicators of the victim's sex. Determination of the victim's age may be more difficult, in that the victim past the age of 18 years have generally achieved their maximum skeletal growth. However, general age determined can be established via dental structure. So, in identifying cadaver, kung hindi po nag-work si fingerprint natin, meron pa po tayong isang method, si forensic odontology or through dental structures. Kasi po, sa dental po, ito po yung isa sa pinakamabisang solution para makilala natin yung victim natin. Next, determination of time of death. Death estimates. So, a determination of the time of death should be attempted in all homicide investigations. This fact is significant because of its investigative importance in corroborating or disputing alibis or in establishing the victim's movements prior to death. Determining death is not an exact science. So, it is very important to know the determination of the death or the determination of time of death for the progress of investigation and for the alleged suspect not to have their alibi. Kasi pag pinatagal po natin yan, lalo na pag may nakakilala dun sa suspect, possible na i-deny niya yung pangyayari at magsabi siya ng kanyang mga alibis. Next, autopsy and necropsy report. It is the process by which the pathologist or the medical legal officer conducts an examination on the cadaver to determine the exact cause of death. So, si autopsy, alam nyo naman yung autopsy, pinakita ko na sa inyo when you are second year. Ganun po yung process ng autopsy. Next, necropsy report, it is a document stating the cause of death of the victim. So, this is the medical legal report. Yung medical legal report, based po yan sa na-autopsy nila na tao. So now, what is the difference? So what do you think is the difference between autopsy and post-mortem examination? Kasi mostly, lumalabas din siya sa board exam. So the post-mortem examination is the cursory examination of the dead body by medical legal officer at the crime scene. So autopsy is more detailed. The difference is that si autopsy meron po siya, nag-i-include siya ng incise po. Yung incise, yung hinihiwa niya yung tao. Well, si post-mortem examination, ina-examine lang po niya yung buong katawan ng tao. Well, si autopsy is more detailed since nakikita niya din kung ano yung nasa loob ng katawan ng isang tao na namatay na po, ha. Next po, post-mortem changes. Post-mortem lividity or livor mortis. It is the discoloration of the body after death. Setting of blood in the dependent portion of the body following death. So, si livor mortis, ito po yung reddish-purple to purple coloration in dependent areas of the body due to accumulation of blood in the small vessels of the dependent areas secondary to gravity. So, this pooling of blood begins immediately after death and becomes fixed in approximately 8 to 12 hours. The investigator can press on the skin in the dependent regions, and if the skin blanches, death has probably occurred less than 12 hours. This becomes fixed after a while and can tell if the body has been moved. This is not a reliable indicator of time of death. This is better indicator of whether that body has been moved since death. And that is the livor mortis. Yung nagkakaroon na po ng pamumuo ng dugo after nang namatay yung isang tao. And it happens 8 to 12 hours after death. The color of lividity may indicate the cause of death. So, pag cherry red to pinkish color, carbon monoxide or poisoning or cyanide. Asphyxia, dark lividity, and for phosphorus poisoning, dark brown. Types of lividity, hypostatic lividity. Blood is still in fluid form inside blood vessel. Changes position of the body changes. So in this, blood remains fluid in the blood vessel for 6 to 8 hours. Diffusion, cut off the blood vessels in the tissue of the body. So it is in dotted form. Si diffusion po, ito po yung mga dugo na in dotted form. Coagulated inside blood vessel, change in position will not change its location. So, yung dugo po natin, sa position natin, kung ano yung naging position natin, dun lang po yung dugo. For example, pahiga, and then yung dugo natin, it's either dito lang po sa likod, or kung ano po yung, depende po sa position ng victim po natin. Next, post-mortem rigidity or yung rigor mortis. Stiffening of the body which occurs 2 to 4 hours after death and is characterized by hardening of the muscles. The chemical reaction that causes rigidity in the muscle groups or stiffening of the body after death due to the disappearance of adenosine triphosphate from the muscle. So, ano ba yung adenosine triphosphate? So, it's an organic compound and hydrotype that provides energy to drive many processes in living cells, muscle construction, nerve impulse propagation, condensate dissolution, and chemical synthesis. So, once na nag-disappear na po yung nagbibigay sa atin ng energy, yun na po yung start ng rigor mortis natin. Kasi once na namatay tayo, nandun pa din naman sa katawan natin yung mga nakain natin. So, once na nawala na yon, since makikita siya sa autopsy, based dun sa autopsy, kung ano yung mga nakain nyo pa din, nandun pa rin naman siya sa loob ng tiyan nyo, nandun pa rin siya sa loob ng katawan nyo. Pero once na nawala na yun, yun na po yung start ng rigor mortis natin. So, rigor mortis disappears with decomposition. Yung unti-unti na pong nagde-decompose sa ating katawan or nade-decay yung katawan natin. Cold and freezing will delay the onset of rigor mortis as well as prolong its presence. So it involves all muscles the same time at the same rate. It appears first in the smaller muscles such as the jaw and then gradually spread to upper and lower extremities. So again, rigor mortis has duration of 24 to 48 hours in the Philippines and other tropical countries, and 36 to 48 hours during summer in the same duration po natin or in the same incident po. Sa rigor mortis, pagka nasa tropical countries ka, 24 to 48 hours yung decomposition or decaying ng body natin, while kapag summer, nasa 36 to 48 hours. Next, algor mortis, cooling of the body. The body cools following death at approximately 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per hour. Under normal condition and assuming the body's temperature at death is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or equivalent to 37 degrees Celsius. So, algor mortis, it is the second stage of death. It is the change in body temperature post-mortem until the ambient temperature match. The change in temperature will be positive as the cooler body acclimates to the accumulates warmer environment. So, bakit po nangyayari si algor mortis or yung cooling of the body? Due to the external factors that can have a significant influence po doon sa victim natin or doon sa dead body. And ano po yung mga factors affecting algor mortis? Just take note po sa apat na factors: illness, clothes, obesity, and room temperature. Next, the onset and stage of decomposition. Decomposition is the action of bacteria on the dead body. The onset of decomposition is 1 to 2 days after death, and then finally, the dead body becomes skeletal remains in months, considering the factors that influence the rate of the putrefaction. Now, ano ba yung putrefaction? Ito po yung unti-unting pagkaagnas ng katawan ng isang dead body. The process or result of decaying, and that is the putrefaction. Next, life cycle of lice. The eggs of ova laid by the flies on the dead body will hatch the 4 maggots within 24 hours. The maggots will feed vigorously on the damaged dead body, then transform into pupal stage and finally into adult flies within a few days. So sa life cycle of the flies, pwede pong magkaroon or makapag reproduce ng flies gamit lang po yung dead body natin. And yung process, nangyayari siya once na nagkaroon na po ng once na nag-start na yung decomposition ng body natin or yung sa putrefaction natin, yung result ng decaying body natin or ng decomposition. Next, changes in the blood. The blood remains fluid in the body after death after 6 to 8 hours, after which it's gradually clotted or coagulated in a slow process until 12 hours, wherein the lividity is already fully developed. And last po, si changes in stomach. It usually takes 3 to 4 hours for the stomach to be empty its content after meals. Next, learning objectives. At the end of the lesson, the learners will be able to differentiate robbery and theft, understand the elements of crime against property and such property such as robbery and theft, and know the initial investigative procedures and important factors in kidnapping cases. So, crimes against property, first is theft. Personal properties are taken without the consent or knowledge of the owner. So, what are the elements for theft? So, what is the difference between theft and robbery? So, there are same elements of theft and robbery. The difference is that si robbery, it uses force and intimidation. Force upon things as means of entry to the house or buildings, and intimidation or violence upon persons. So, in theft, an example of it is pickpocketing or pickpockets. Well, si robbery, once na gumamit ka ng forces or intimidation sa isang bagay, nandun na po ang tinatawag nating robbery. So, these are the elements of robbery: that there be personal property belonging to another, that there is a lawful taking of that property, that the taking must be with intent to gain, and that there is violence against or intimidation of any person or force upon things. So, the elements of robbery is same as the elements of theft. The difference is that si elements of robbery is meron po siya violence against or intimidation of any person or force upon things. So there are two general types of robbers, the amateurs and professionals. So what is the difference between amateurs and professional? Amateurs, they are motivated by greed, the desire for a thrill and self-testing. While si professional po are those persons who work as robbers as a trade making if they're living and having no other means of income. So si amateur, dahil lang po sa greed niya sa ibang tao, kaya po siya nagiging robbers or nakakakommit ng robbery. While si professional po, those who work as robbers as a trade making in their living and having no other means of income. And ginagamit niya lang po si robbery as their income na. Si amateur, meron lang po siyang desire or meron lang po siyang greed. Kaya po siya nakakakommit ng robbery. So sa robbery po, since kanina may sinasabi po tayo na force upon things with intimidation and force upon things, kailan po ba nangyayari si force upon things? That the things is belonging to another person from whom property was taken not to be legal owner, possession is sufficient. The property must be personal property and cannot refer to real property. Dapat po, yung kanyang, yung bagay na kinukuha niya ay hindi sa kanya, belonging to another. Next, name of the real owner is not essential so as long as the personal property taken does not belong to the accused except if the crime is robbery with homicide. Next, taking of personal property must be lawful. If given in trust, meron po siyang tinatawag na estapa. Once na nagkaroon ng trust, estapa po yung case na maipapataw sa kanya. Next, as to robbery with violence or intimidation, from the moment the offender gains possession of the thing, even if offender has had no opportunity to dispose of the same, the unlawful taking is complete. As to robbery with force upon things must be taken out of the building. Kasi kung nandun ka lang din sa building na yun, hindi siya mo-consider as robbery. Pero once na nakuha mo yung bagay at gumamit ka ng force upon things, that is, we can call it robbery. With intent to gain also. Presumed from unlawful taking. Intent to gain may be presumed from the unlawful taking of one another's property. However, when one takes a property under the claim of ownership or title, the taking is not considered to be with intent to gain. Next, when there's no intent to gain, but there is violence in the taking, grave coercion. Violence or intimidation must be against the person of the offended party, not upon the thing. And yes, you have the violence or intimidation dun po sa may-ari ng bahay, hindi dun sa bagay na kinukuha mo. As a general rule, violence or intimidation must be present before the taking is complete. And of course, sa robbery, always remember that the difference po is may force upon thing and may intimidation. Well, si theft, kinukuha mo lang siya without force upon things and intimidation. Next, Article 267, Kidnapping and Serious Illegal Detention. So these are the elements of kidnapping and serious illegal detention. That the offender is a private individual, that the kidnaps or detains another or in any other matter deprives the latter of his liberty, that the act of detention or kidnapping must be illegal, that in the commission of the offense, any of the following circumstances is present. These are the circumstances: that the kidnapping of detention lasts for more than 3 days, that is committed simulating public authority, that any serious physical injury are inflicted upon person kidnapped or detained of threats to kill him or made, or that the persons kidnapped is a minor, female, or a public officer. So any private individual who shall kidnap or detain another or any other manner deprive him of his liberty. So the perpetrator shall suffer the penalty of reclusion perpetua to death if the kidnapping or detention shall have lasted for more than 5 days. Committed by simulating public authority, any serious physical injury shall be inflicted upon the person kidnapped or detained if threat to kill should have been made. The person kidnapped or detained shall be minor, female, or public officer. Same as say under the elements of Article 267. Kailan po nagkakaroon ng penalty ng reclusion perpetua to death kapag po naglas po siya ng 5 days. Pero pag hindi, pwede pong mapababa yung kaso niya, ay yung sentence niya. Pero hindi po yan bababa mostly sa reclusion temporal. So the penalty shall be death where the kidnapping or detention was committed for the purpose of extorting ransom from the victim or any other person, even if none of the circumstances above were present in the commission of the offense. So there are important factors in kidnapping cases. So there are 2 important factors: the safe return of the victim and the identification and apprehension of the suspect. So kidnapping when ransom is involved. First is the phase 1 and phase 2. Sa phase 1, when a complaint is received, the family of the victim is requested to remain in touch to accumulate information needed. So there are information that must be taken under this phase 1. First is how the demand was made. Second, request the family to refrain from divulging the contents of the letter, note, or call to anyone except to the police authorities. Third, emphasize the importance of news blackout as essential to the victim's safety. 4, obtain and preserve the ransom note for laboratory examination. Determine if the family intends to pay the ransom. Investigators should avoid giving the opinion as to ransom payments. Next, find ways and means to verify if the victim is still alive. Conduct family background investigation. Conduct covert investigation of household helpers. Arrange for wiretapping operation in accordance with RA 4200 or yung Anti-Wiretapping Act, and establish possible motives. So, sa kidnapping for ransom, those are the information or the type information that are needed para po sa complaint na na-receive ng family ng victim. Para po sa progress ng report nila or progress para makuha natin yung na-victima na or na-kidnap na tao. Next, for our phase 2, after the victim has been returned or the body has been located. After the victim has been returned dead or alive, the investigation changes. An all-out investigation are conducted in accordance with the second objective, to identify and apprehend the suspect. Of course, once na na-return na si victim, kasi sa phase 1 natin, nandiyan na yung mga complaint, hinahanap natin si victim. Sa phase 2 natin, nakita na natin si victim, na-return na si victim. It's either dead or alive. So, maalin man sa dalawang situation, kailangan pa ding mag-conduct ng apprehension of the suspects. So, investigative procedures includes thorough interview of the victim. All details should be obtained. So, ito kung buhay si victim. Next, re-interview all witnesses, conduct surveillance, determine whether the kidnapper is familiar with the victim's residential area, habits, and financial status, and if the victim is dead, follow the pattern of homicide investigation. So, that will be all in under preliminary examination natin. Yun na po yung remaining topics na natitira sa under CDI 3. Then, for 5th week, for next week, review nyo lang po nang i-review lahat po nung nai-upload na videos and yung mga handouts na naibigay sa inyo. Same lang naman halos yung handouts and presentation na nadidiscuss. Para po pagdating ng 5th week, if ever na magkaroon tayo ng recitation, makakapag-recite kayo. Basta aralin nyo lang po yun. Then yung mga activities, I will be posting it in Google Classroom. So that's all, and thank you and God bless.